Good evening and welcome to BATV News. I'm Kalila Reynolds. The state-owned oil refinery Petrojam is seeking to reassure Jamaicans that the increase in fuel prices is unrelated to matters in Jamaica. 87 and 90 gasoline went up by $2.60 a liter this morning, while diesel increased by $2.85 a liter, and ultra-low sulfur diesel went up by a dramatic $3.41, and kerosene by $4.08. In a statement from the Office of the Prime Minister today, Petrojam says the local prices are based on the price for which the commodity is purchased on the international market. The prices are adjusted weekly. The management of Petrojam says petrol prices have largely remained stable since the start of the year. However, General Manager at Petrojam, Winston Watson, says the government has no control over fuel prices, and he says this week's increase is not the largest the country has seen this year. According to Watson, there were larger increases earlier this year, but prices later trended down and remained relatively stable. Petrojam says this week's increases are mainly due to international political issues and the annual high-peak summer travel season across the world. Meanwhile, opposition spokesman on energy Philip Paulwell says crude oil prices are not what's causing the historic increase in gas prices. He says crude prices have remained stable over the past months. He's again calling on the government to remove a portion of the tax on petrol. Sashana Small has more.
Mr. Paulwell says globally fuel prices have been stable over the past month, and so the increase in prices Jamaicans are experiencing at the pumps is because of the tax imposed by the government.
Fuel, crude in particular, has been quite stable over the last number of months. You have not seen the volatility that we saw in the 2000s when the price moved up to $150 per barrel. It is not envisaged that we will get there, and that the stability will be maintained around the $69 per barrel. So there is no wild swing taking place in the area of oil prices at this time, and therefore we should not be seeing the tremendous increases that we have been over the last month or so.
The special consumption tax SCT on petrol was raised in 2015 to pay for a hedge against high oil prices, but the Andrew Holness administration decided not to renew it when it expired in September 2016. The opposition spokesman says since the tax is not being used as insurance against higher gas prices anymore, the government shouldn't stop collecting it.
All the money that was collected under this special tax has gone straight into the consolidated fund with no benefit in terms of an insurance against higher prices for energy products. And that's the reason why we believe that it is being collected under false pretenses and that it should no longer be collected under the consumers be allowed to have that money in their pocket.
Paulwell says if the government stops collecting these taxes, gas prices could go down by $7 to $10.
It would be somewhere in the region of about $7 to $10 per litre, and that is significant.
For BATV News, I'm Shoshana Small.
Bank of Jamaica Governor Brian Winter is dismissing suggestions by the PNP that the central bank is deliberately weakening the Jamaican dollar against the U.S. dollar to meet its inflation targets. Here's more in this BATV News exclusive.
Last week, Shadow Minister on Finance Mark Golding said the BOJ's lack of communication on the foreign dollar market has left room for what he describes as unhelpful speculation. He claims reports are that the BOJ is deliberately driving the fall in the currency to increase inflation to reach their 4 to 6% target.
Inflation rate has actually been slightly negative, 0.3%, and the BOJ has a target for inflation, which is between 4 and 6% for the fiscal year. And because they're so far below their target, there has been speculation that one of their strategies or tactics to try and get inflation back within their target range is to aggressively build up reserves by buying US dollars out of the market in an aggressive way without being particularly concerned about price.
But the head of the central bank says the allegations are false.
Firstly, the idea that we would do that is false. We absolutely would not seek to manipulate the exchange rate. But more important, I think, is when you look at the exchange rate, what we just talked about, the notion that that has been manipulated, I think we can easily dismiss once you look at the amount of transparency that we have actually brought to the exchange market.
According to the PNP, the BOJ has bought US dollars for as high as 137 Jamaican dollars at the latest scheduled auction, which has created confusion in the business community. But the BOJ's governor says the Bank of Jamaica's Foreign Exchange Intervention and Trading Tool, BFIXIT, has allowed the BOJ to be more transparent with how the exchange rate is set and for more information to be available to the public.
A big part of the BFIXIT is that information about the exchange rate is available in a way that was never before. Bank of Jamaica does its dealing, its trading with the market when it buys and sells exclusively through or more and more, I should say, through these auctions where the amounts we set are known in advance. The reason why we set it is also known in advance.
For BATV News, I'm Shoshana Small.
And tune in to our business and current affairs program On Point right after this newscast for the full interview with the BOJ Governor, Brian Winter. Chairman of the Spectrum Management Authority, SMA, Trevor Forrest, has resigned. In a letter addressed to the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, dated Tuesday, July 31, Forrest says his resignation is in the best interest of the impeccable record of the SMA, the government, and the people of Jamaica. He says he made his decision after giving careful consideration and having conversations with family and friends about the different perspectives and viewpoints surrounding actions attributed to him in the public domain in relation to the execution of his duties as chairman of the SMA. He says the board will take the necessary actions to nominate a new chairman and advise the Prime Minister accordingly. Forrest's resignation comes after it was alleged that he attempted to use his position as chairman of the SMA to have Carolyn Warren shortlisted as a candidate for manager of the SMA after the application period had passed. It also follows calls by the PNP for Forrest to resign, calling his actions an abuse of power. Forrest is the latest in a string of resignations from the Ministry of Energy, including the minister himself, Dr. Andrew Wheatley. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Andrew Holness has summoned all boards associated with the energy portfolio to an important meeting at the office of the Prime Minister next week. The boards expected to appear are the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica, PCJ, National Energy Solutions Limited, NESOL, Wigton Wind Farm, Petrojam Ethanol Limited, Board of Examiners, Jamaica Aircraft Refueling Services, and Government Electrical Regulator. BATV News understands that the boards are being called in to be given direct policy instructions by the Prime Minister, who is the minister currently in charge of the energy portfolio after Dr. Andrew Wheatley, former minister, resigned last week. And when we come back, there is a new deadline for the renovations at the Cornwall Regional Hospital. But will they be met, as the government hasn't even hired a contractor yet? This and more after the break. Welcome back. Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Sansia Bennett-Templer, says exceptional work is being done to restore the Cornwall Regional Hospital to meet a new deadline of August 2019. But having not even employed a general contractor to start the project, concerns are being raised about the practicality of the timeline. The questions were raised at the Ministry of Health's first update on the Western Hospital. Jamila Maitland was there.
With a 12-month deadline, a $2 billion budget, Mrs. Bennett-Templer says the Cornwall Regional Hospital will be restored and things will be normalized. But when quizzed about the name of the contractor, the permanent secretary says the ministry has not yet sent out a bid for the project.
The general contractor has not yet been hired, not yet been contracted. What we have in place at this time is a structural engineering firm doing all of the design. First, they're doing an assessment and the design work with the structural engineering. You have the mechanical, electrical, planning, and gases firm who have done their assessment and are now doing the design. Because what has been agreed is that at this stage, as Professor Caro is indicating, we need to make sure that everything that needs to be done is done.
But she's reassuring the public that the program's team, led by APEC, an engineering and consulting firm, has done a large percentage of the inspection, layout and plans, which must be perfected before the bid goes to the public.
As indicated, a lot of complex work. It requires proper planning, because if it's not properly planned, then you will have problems again in the future. So we have to make sure that we get the planning right, the work specifications done, and then bring the general contractor in to complete the actual renovations.
Meanwhile, Chairman of the hospital's Oversight Committee, Dr. Archibald McDonald, says the scope of work has since changed from a project to a program, as the amount of work to be done has become more complex.
There's a lot of work which will eventually take place, visible work, but even before that visible work, there's a lot of planning and preparation before you can commence the actual physical work. Some physical work is taken.
He adds that further inspections at the hospital affected its redesign, but he says after the renovation, several medical treatments will be available on the western end of the island. For BATV News, I'm Jamila Maitland.
Nearly 15,000 more people were working this April than last April. The unemployment rate also remained fairly stable compared to January, and youth unemployment continues to decline. That's according to Statin's labor force figures for April 2018. Javon Keys has the breakdown.
The unemployment rate for April 2018 was recorded at 9.7%. That's an improvement over the 12.2% recorded for April last year. However, it's a minimal increase compared to the record low of 9.6% in January. Meanwhile, the employed labor force for April was 1.2 million persons. That's an increase of almost 15,000 persons over April 2017. Nearly twice as many women than men gained jobs during the period. The number of employed males went up by nearly 5,000, bringing the number of employed males to 647,000. Comparatively, the female labor force grew by nearly 10,000. The group elementary occupations grew the most compared to April last year. This group includes people like car washers, street vendors and housekeepers in hotels. Almost 175,000 persons were employed in the occupation group as of April, an increase of 13,200 persons. And the industry that grew the most was wholesale and retail, repair of motor vehicle and equipment, with 13,300 persons being employed. That's up by 5.8%. Youth unemployment, which accounts for persons aged 14 to 24 years, continues to trend downwards, coming in at 25.8% compared to 29% in April last year. For BATV News, I'm Javon Keys.
Jamaica's international trade deficit went up by some 12%, and exports to CARICOM decreased between January and May. Here's more.
Jamaica's trade deficit went up by 12% for the January to May 2018 period, amounting to about $1.8 billion. That's up from the almost $1.6 million recorded for the same period in 2017. Total expenditure on imports also increased, moving from $2.1 billion up to $2.4 billion for the period, an increase of almost $318 million. The main contributors to the increase were the commodities groups, mineral fuels, machinery and transport equipment, chemicals, manufactured goods, and food. Earnings from total exports were valued at almost $686 million for the January to May 2018 period. That's an increase of just $128.4 million compared to last year. Domestic exports also saw an increase in earnings, going up by 27%, amounting to $660 million. Re-exports, however, saw a 31% decline, coming in at $25.6 million. Traditional domestic exports represented 63.1% of total domestic exports. This section recorded US $417 million, up by 41%, while non-traditional domestic exports went up by 3.5%, valued at $244 million US. In the meantime, Jamaica's trade deficit with CARICOM went up to US $163 million for the period from $136 million. Imports from the region saw a 14% increase, amounting to $196 million US, while exports went down by 3.5%, valued at $32.8 million US. For BATV News, I'm Javon Keys.
And when we come back, Apple becomes the first company ever to be valued at $1 trillion US. This and more in regional and international news up next. Welcome back. It's time now for regional and international news. Apple became the first $1 trillion US publicly traded company shortly before noon today, briefly crossing the lofty mark in a closely watched ascent that made stock market history. Here's more.
It's the company that promised to change the world. Today, it's iPhones and other products the center of life on the go. Now, Apple making history as the world's first $1 trillion company.
It just solidifies the fact that this is a company that's been hitting all cylinders for a very long time and continues to do so.
It's been a remarkable turnaround from 22 years ago when the company was on the brink of bankruptcy. Then founder Steve Jobs returned to fix the company he created.
And the question is, where is Apple relevant?
And it paid off. A $1,000 investment in the company back then worth about $450,000 today. Apple is now led by CEO Tim Cook, who talked to Lester in November.
You may soon be head of a $1 trillion company. When you think about that, what goes through your mind?
The truth is I don't think about it, to be really honest. What I view a stock price to be a result of doing other things well.
But potential new tariffs on China, where most of Apple's products are made, could now give Apple and Cook a significant challenge.
With less than 2 weeks to go before the Bahamian government demolishes all the shanty towns predominantly occupied by Haitians, groups are lobbying for ways to protect the locals to transition from a home to going homeless in a matter of days. More from ZNS Network.
Haitians living in shantytowns now have 9 days to move. Shantytown Task Force Chairman Senator Dion Folks providing an update on this process and says some residents are moving.
Well, I can tell you Lazaretta Road, for example, which was featured on one of your stations last night, there's only 2 families there now out of 30. And I think one is moving today. So there'll only be 1 remaining. A significant amount of persons have already moved, and some buildings have already been torn down by the residents themselves. Other than Lazaretta, I don't want to give you a full figure, but I would say anyway, because I don't have the empirical data, and I don't want to give you misleading information. But depending on who you speak to, it can range from anywhere from 30% to 70%.
Haitian Pastors League President Jean-Paul Charles also renewed his call to the government to give shantytown residents preference to acquire the land after demolition. He says there are 150 to 200 families who are willing to move, but are challenged with funding.
I've been talking to the government, and then we're here to continue to appeal to see if they, since they have been living in this area so long, if something can, they can assist them. And what we've been saying is for the government to have the law in one hand and the other hand to have compassion.
Folks says the government plans to transform shantytowns into affordable housing communities that meets the country's building code.
All of the land, the vacant land that would be made available as a result of this exercise will be used for the development of low-cost housing for Bahamians. Once you're Bahamian, you have the right to apply. No matter what your descent is, whether you're Jamaican Bahamian, Canadian Bahamian, Haitian Bahamian, don't matter. Once you're Bahamian, you can apply.
For ZNS Network News, I'm DeAndre Williamson.
3 people were killed when soldiers opened fire on opposition supporters who were protesting the slow release of election results in Harare, Zimbabwe. President Emerson Mnangagwa's ZANU-PF party won 2/3 of the seats in parliament, but the rest of the presidential vote is not yet known. Al Jazeera's Haru Mutasa reports from Harare.
Opposition supporters say their vote was stolen. They are demanding transparency from the Electoral Commission. Official results show the ruling ZANU-PF party has won a majority in parliament. These people are convinced the results were rigged. The police move in to disperse them, but when that failed, the army took over. Those who tried to resist were dealt with. President Emerson Mnangagwa has warned the opposition against causing trouble.
The alliance and its leadership has forthwith to remove its violent supporters from the streets so peace returns to our country. In asking them to take this necessary step, government is simply reminding them of their duties as the responsible political players and as citizens.
The main opposition alliance say the army used unnecessary force. 3 people had been killed.
Any disorder may be dealt with by the police, who are best trained for public order. Soldiers are trained to kill during war. We are seriously meant to wonder what this means. Are we in war? Are civilians the enemy of the state?
The EU Election Observer Mission says presidential election results should be released as soon as possible to avoid more violence.
The longer it lasts to count, the more lack of credibility comes up, that something will be forged. Therefore, it's needed that it must be a traceability of the result down to the polling station level.
But opposition supporters say if their candidate, Nelson Chamisa, doesn't win, they won't accept it. The results center is over there. Opposition supporters have been trying to get in, but the police have been pushing them back. So they've been burning tires in protest. They insist that their candidate, the main opposition leader, Nelson Chamisa, has won this election. There they are over there. They're refusing to leave in protest. By law, presidential results have to be announced by Saturday. Most Zimbabweans are anxious about what could happen if the loser doesn't accept defeat. Haru Mutasa, Al Jazeera, Harare.
Stay with us. Talking Stocks comes up next. Welcome back. Time now for Talking Stocks. 50 stocks traded today, of which 25 advanced, 16 declined, and 9 traded firm. The main JSE index advanced by 108 points to close at over 313,000 points. The junior index advanced by 8 points to close at 3,110. Over 5.7 million units traded, valued at over $37.7 million on the Jamaican dollar market. While on the U.S. dollar market, 98,429 units traded, valued at more than 87,000 U.S. dollars. Mayberry Investments, with a little over 1 million units trading, accounted for 17% of market volume. JMMB Group 7.5% Jamaican dollar preference shares, with 952,000 units trading, was second. And Mayberry Jamaican Equities, with a little over 500,000 units trading, accounted for 9% of market volume. Sterling Investment Ordinary Shares was the top advancer, up $1.17 to close at $13.17, followed by Alaska Distributors, up 22 cents to close at $3.98, and Grace Kennedy, up $2.94 to close at $56. The main decliners were Derrimon Trading Ordinary Shares, down $2.87 to close at $20.63, followed by CAC 2000 Ordinary Shares, down 82 cents to close at $9, and Siboney Group down a cent to close at 12 cents. In foreign exchange trading, the Jamaican dollar continues to lose to the U.S. currency, but gained on the Canadian dollar and British pound today. The U.S. dollar ended the day trading for $135.53, gaining 9 cents on the Jamaican dollar. The Canadian dollar ended the day trading for $105.15, losing 6 cents to the Jamaican, and the British pound ended today trading for $174.78, losing 84 cents to the Jamaican dollar. And that's the news. But before we go, a recap of our top story. Thanks. I'm Kalila Reynolds. The state-owned oil refinery Petrojam is seeking to reassure Jamaicans that the increase in fuel prices is unrelated to matters in Jamaica. 87 and 90 gasoline went up by $2.60 a liter this morning. Thanks for watching. I'm Kalila Reynolds. For more content, visit our website at batvja.com. Pleasant viewing.